Доброго ранку, шановні пані і панове. Я Україна економічну частину.
I congratulate you with this historic event. Ukraine signed the association agreement, as the president said. That is the second, the most important event in the history of Ukraine from the times of its independence. The first speaker will be Vasyl Kalymon, the Canadian economist and the chair of the Economic Advisory Council. He will talk about what reforms Ukraine should implement to enjoy the benefits of the association agreement signed in the morning.
You and all of us Ukrainians with the signing of the historic document of the economic part of the association agreement in Brussels, which President Poroshenko claimed as the most important event in the history of Ukraine after getting its independence. How to leverage all the benefits of this document, of this agreement, we will speak to Mr. Vasyl Kalymon, Canadian economist and the chair of the Economic Consulting Council by the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine. Mr. Kalymon, the floor is yours.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you. I am Ukrainian by origin, though most of my life I lived in diaspora, so I will be probably making mistakes in Ukrainian, but I will try to present in Ukrainian. I would like to say, first of all, I would like to say that this is the historic event, what happened in the morning. But also I would like to mention that the project that I've been working on for a couple of months. A couple of months ago, Minister Sheremetyevo requested me to work with him on organization of the Economic Advisory Council at the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine. And during these 2 months, we've managed jointly to organize quite an interesting council. I distributed some of the materials. I am so happy to work with Darren Shemoglu, Dr. Anders Aslan, Senior Research Institute in Washington, Mr. Kaha Bindukidze from Tbilisi, from Georgia, and Dr. Oleg Gavrilishin from Canada, from University of Toronto, used to work in IMF, and they all work together with me in the council. During the last 2 months, we've organized different materials. We reviewed different analysis and papers. We interviewed different organizations like World Bank, IMF, EU assistance funds, and similar organizations, so that we understand the situation better. Also, we were supported by the Canadian Embassy. There's one representative of the Canadian Embassy here. We had support, both moral and material, from them, from the Canadian government. You know that the Canadian government supports Ukraine a lot. Today, I would like to to talk about our preliminary ideas and about the general concept. That is the plan that I distributed, the plan which yesterday at the meeting we approved as our first advice, what needs to be done, how to make use of the opportunities created by the signing of the economic part of association agreement and also in relation to IMF loans provided to support the economy of Ukraine. Also, this is a historic moment because we have the new president and there is a big pressure to change something. Everyone wants to see real change in economy, growth of economy. And we had the meeting to provide the first concept of how this should look like. And I would like to say that the most important issue is quick, radical economic reforms. Everything else that I will be talking about is one sentence. We cannot forget the loans. We cannot forget that the loans, the association will give us nothing unless we have a deep economic reforms in this country. That is the main statement. This is the historic chance. We look at it as at the historic opportunity. Not from the negative point of view that something is to be destroyed, but something is to be constructed so that we go along the way of growth to better well-being in Ukraine. That is the general concept and the most important concept, and I want it to be the main message that we would like to give. We absolutely support that. I listened to your president speaking in Brussels. His words to combat corruption. These were his first, some of the first words. So in this respect, we agree 100% with what has been stated by the highest authority. But what does it mean? We need to look at the reforms which are to be developed. First of all, that's corruption reduction. I use the word reduction because everyone realistically knows that there is corruption in every state. But unfortunately here, this is at such a scale that it has to be combated. How is that done? We need to, for example, carry out substantial deregulation. This regulation adds to the opportunity of the corruption. The deregulation hampers the development of economy usually. So that is why we need to deregulate. Also, we need to simplify business procedures. Many entrepreneurs say, we know from different global analysis that business procedures in Ukraine are too complicated. Reduce the number of regulatory agencies sharply. And that is from the best practices of other countries. And that is to be implemented. There are more items there, but I would like to limit my presentation so that we have time for questions. So the first and most important is corruption reduction. The second item, which is very important, where radical reforms are needed, that is the reform in energy markets. Most important is to move domestic gas prices to market levels, which is so important, especially now when Russia, Gazprom, decided not to supply gas to Ukraine. That had to be done in any case, but now this is the necessary step which is to be implemented as quickly as possible. Also, we need to understand that there will be some social consequences, and There should be the support provided to the community which is weaker in financial terms, and the high prices are to be compensated for this part of the community. There are certain structural needs, like separate companies transmitting and producing energy. It is very important to separate these companies so that they can better develop. And also open gas mineral rights market to both domestic and foreign companies. The system is to be changed. There are too many licenses that stops the development. And Ukraine has a huge potential here. Item number 3, rule of law. Rule of law. I'm used to English term rule of law. That is really one of the fundamental issues. Why are we talking about that? Because corruption is not just ethics, it's economics as well. It's very important for the development of economy. And here we need to look at how to get rid of corrupt judges, remove corrupt judges. Also, we need to develop programs for enhancing quality of justice system. There should be also the separate panel for separate commercial dispute resolution. Also, another issue is tax code. Rationalized procedures for tax compliance and inspection. That is very complicated and very corrupt thing in Ukraine, which needs to be changed. And I understand that there are some projects, but they are to be implemented.
This is again related to the economy of added values. This should be simplified to allow this added value. Also, we need to simplify the tax system by reducing a number of taxes. Currently, you have an exaggerated number of taxes. Also, trade enhancement. We should reform system of VAT refunds. We have a huge problem here in order to and also prepare for likely Russian trade sanctions. We have suggestions how to fight in the legal field, but you should be prepared economically. Also, provide support for expansion of EU trade through market information, trade fairs, etc. There is a huge potential. I looked at the statistics. The Ukrainian export to the EU is negligent in percentage, and this only suggests that here we have huge potential. And also promotion of foreign direct investment should be ensured. This won't be so easy now. At this moment, we will have the MIFF, EBRR, etc. That is huge international institutions. Private investors will come later when they will see that there is predictedness. Banking sector is in huge crisis. There we have to establish a structure to deal with non-performing loans in bank portfolios. It is necessary to recapitalize viable banks. I spoke to the IFC headquarters in Washington. They have big assets and funds which they would like to streamline on recapitalization of viable banks. The next issue is agricultural sector. Here we have the huge issue with legalizing private sales of agricultural land. Without this, any reforms in this sector won't be possible. The next impediment is bureaucracy, and we should restructure bureaucracy. And Ministry of Economic Development and Trade is a big ministry. You should turn it into dynamic organization, into the policy making and economic reforming body. And the ninth issue is macroeconomic stabilization, although it should be probably put first item. The deficit of the national budget must be brought under control. Ukraine has signed the IMF agreement with the IMF, where the public debt should be decreased considerably within several years. And we believe that Ukraine should think about unilateral accept of Maastricht criteria for public debt, percentage of GDP, and for the budget deficit in percentage of GDP. The last item is about monetary policy. The hryvnia exchange rate is now floating, and Ukraine has confirmed that the exchange rate will be changed, and it will remain floating, and it will prevent manipulations which were witnessed in the past. I took a bit more time than it was expected. Any questions from the audience? I will ask the question. President Poroshenko keeps stating, and yesterday he again stated that eradication of corruption is the must. If you look at the plan of essential reforms, could you mention the top priority together with the corruption eradication, which should be number one is anti-corruption actions. Number two is energy market. Actually, the entire list, that numbers, they coincide with the priority priority rank, which we give to each, which we grant to each of these positions. Some of them should be done simultaneously. As far as I understand, this plan is part to the reform implementation by 2020. We have not sketched out the exact time frames, but this is sketch of reforms. We are advisory councils, and these are ideas which we suggested as our vision based on our experience from previous situations. Ukrainian people like to hear about specific time frames, and from your own experience, from experience of the countries which have passed reforms like Georgia, what is your estimate? How much time will Ukraine need to implement this reform? I will provide an example from Poland. One of our analysis made suggests that 20 years ago, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Poland has more or less a flat level of well-being with Ukraine, while now the level of well-being of ordinary people in Poland is 3 times higher than in Ukraine. Since Ukraine steps into this way, then we could expect that in the future it will have the same results. You mean that we will reach such a level of per capita GDP that we will that the EU will be interested in Ukraine in a
The membership is quite a difficult thing, and they have not agreed to that yet. I believe membership, well, that will take another 10 years, but that's political issue. That's outside of my competence. Any other questions? Day newspaper. I was present when Ukrainian economist was talking about his reform plan. It looked to me more effective. Maybe you will disagree. He said, let's review all the codes which exist in Ukraine, because all of them have not been basically producing any result during these 23 years. And where we do not have codes, let's draft them. How would you assess this initiative? First of all, it's very difficult to comment on what I do not know. I haven't seen it, I haven't heard it, I haven't read it. Andriy Novak, maybe you know him. I just want to say that about the code, talking about the regulation, we agree. That was the first step to eliminate massively, we call it deregulation. Unfortunately, it's not into the mic and we cannot hear. We do support the concept to massively get rid of all these agencies. That is, issue 1, that's basically about the regulation. If I understand the word code correctly, that means simplification of business processes, and that means that many codes will be eliminated and the number of regulating bodies will be also reduced. We agree? Yes, we agree. Any other questions? Okay, then on the last question from me. You mentioned the possible aggression of Russia after Ukraine signed the association agreement. There's information about possible trade wars with Russia. Do you have the plan B to oppose the attack of Russia, especially in trade issues? We're writing about diversification of trade relations, which means that there are huge opportunities in the EU. Other markets of the world are there. Ukraine is not in the same situation as 20 years ago. We've got a lot of diversification, and it should continue. Thank you for sharing with us this plan of reforms. You can pick up the detailed plan, the press release up over there at the table. Thank you.